Does it really 900? I compare the Marshall JCM 900 pedal to an original Marshall JCM 900 amplifier. Was that the pedal or the amplifier? Stick around to find out. Let's face it.
You either love the JCM 900
or you hate the JCM 900.
But there's no denying the fact that this amplifier was the sound of the 90s. Many of those famous pop punk bands got their tones from a JCM 900. Well, with the help of Sweetwater, who are sponsoring this video, they provided the JCM 900 pedal. And I was curious, can this pedal really do that 900 thing? Well, to figure that out, I've recorded a pop punk kind of tune where I've
ripped off a few riffs.
And I recorded it once with the pedal, once with the amplifier. I'm going to start off by giving you a blind shootout. I want to see how keen your ears are. You can guess in the comments if you think you know which is the pedal, which is the amplifier. Of course, we're listening to a mix. I'm going to break it all down after the fact so we can hear the tones and really understand, can the JCM 900 pedal really do that 900 thing? By the way, if you don't know me, I am Dan, the self-proclaimed lonely rocker. I cover all things guitar and gear. Let's get into this. All right, I had a lot of fun putting that together. That is the quintessential JCM 900 sound. Now, I understand if you're into sort of modern progressive metal or, detuned stuff or even some classic rock, the JCM 900 is kind of its own thing. And that sound that they had in the 90s, a lot of it came from this amplifier, and it does that really, really well. But it's certainly not sort of a modern style high gain amplifier. It just delivers something really, really different. But I love it for what it is and not for what it's not. I've talked a lot about this amplifier on my channel. I've got a bunch of videos on it. Maybe I'll put some links in the description if you want to check those out later. Now, I wasn't really into those 90s bands in the 90s, but I've really come to appreciate that sound, sort of the simplistic nature of it, the melodies, and certainly the energy. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed that. Would love your thoughts on that. Anyways, we did listen to that in a mix, obviously, and you're like,
they're lonely rocker, I can't really hear the amplifier.
Well, I will break it down for you so you can hear the pedal and the amp in isolation and give you one more chance to choose which one you think is the pedal and which is the amplifier. Hopefully you're playing along in the comments. Before I get there, though, I want to share the signal chain. Today's weapon of choice is the ESP LTD Deluxe Phoenix 1000. Of course, always equipped with my favorite strings. I've got the Stringjoy 10 to 46 on here. Stringjoy is available at Sweetwater, among other places. Love me some Stringjoy strings, made in Nashville, Tennessee. I'll put a link in the description if you want more information on those. But this guitar, which was recorded DI into my system so I can reamp, and both performances between the pedal and the amplifier were identical, because sometimes just the way you're playing can affect how an amp sounds. So I wanted that to be consistent. When reamping, there's one constant factor between the two, and we're utilizing the power amp section of this amplifier, and I'll explain why in a second. So from the output of the amplifier, I'll start there. I take the speaker output that's running about 30 feet into another room over there somewhere. My Angle 4x12 XXL is isolated over there, and that's mic'd with two Sennheiser E906s that are coming back into this room through my Warm Audio 273 EQ. That's a Neve style preamp with EQ. EQs are bypassed. I didn't want to influence that with any external EQ, and that goes directly into my audio interface. Now, when using the amplifier, my guitar, or the guitar signal anyways, is plugged into the face of the amplifier, running through that signal chain as I just explained. When I use the pedal, that's where it's different. That same DI comes directly into the pedal, and then the output of the pedal goes into the return of the amplifier. That completely bypasses the preamp, the tubes in the preamp. We're just sharing the power amp section. I know I might get a little bit of flack for that, but I wanted the signal path to be as similar as possible because really most of the tone is being generated by the preamp, perhaps with a little bit of influence with the power amp section. But this way we are bypassing this completely. I think just levels the playing field a little bit. Marshall describes the JCM 900 as an amp positioned in between the bright bite of a JCM 800 and a bottom-heavy DSL. The 900 is famous for having additional diode clipping, giving this amp more distortion than an 800. The pedal is a stripped-down version of the amp with 4 controls and a foot switch. The gain sets the pre-level distortion. The contour knob is a mid-range adjustment, allowing you to scoop the mids or make them more focused. The tone knob is a high-frequency roll-off, and the volume sets the output of the pedal. The foot switch lets you turn the pedal on and off, and the bright white indicator ring lets you know when the pedal is active. You've got in and out jacks, and the pedal can be powered with a standard 9-volt battery or adapter. All right, so we've heard it in the mix, so why don't we listen to those tones in solo? I've stripped out all the double tracking, and let me know if you can figure out which one is the pedal and which one is the amp. So, any ideas? I really love those of you who like to play along in the comments. We'd love to hear your running thoughts as we run through this comparison. Now, there's something interesting to my ear is that there were more differences when I was muting. But when I opened it up a little bit, those differences became more subtle. And one or the other just reacts differently, perhaps, to the playing. Now, keep in mind, these are analog devices, and I tried to get them as close as possible. There's some tolerance here. Also, the amplifier has a lot more settings on it than the pedal does. So I actually set the pedal first, and then I tried to mimic that tone with the amplifier. It just made it easier to get those a bit closer. Now, those differences were impossible to detect in the mix, in my opinion, but there are some subtle differences there. Is that better, or is that just different? Is it maybe just a little setting on the amp where the pedal would have brought that a little closer together? I actually tried getting that closer in the mix with a little bit of EQ, just to see if I could do it, and I got it pretty close, but I didn't want to include that in the shootout because that would be cheating. Anyways, let's take a listen to the melodic parts. I think we're going to hear something a little bit different in those, or will we? Let's check it out. So again, to my ear, the differences were more obvious when I was muting. You know, with that sort of chuggy melody at the beginning, there was definitely some clear differences between the two within a similar spectrum, but there were differences there. But when I opened it up with those octave melodies, those differences suddenly melted away. And I wonder if those differences sort of maybe the lower mids, or if I'm chugging, it's introducing maybe a little lower end frequencies. Perhaps that's where the difference is. Again, that could be a setting on the amp or the pedal, or again, it's just how each device is reacting to some of the lower end frequencies. I find that interesting, but curious what your thoughts are on that. Again, hope you're playing along. Anyways, enough of the mystery. I think it's time to reveal which one is which. Let's check it out. So did you guess right? I would really love to know if you guessed that right off the top. I mean, we're probably guessing here. Listen, I did a test for myself where I created a long loop and I closed my eyes and I just randomly started it one place. I thought I knew, and I can hear the nuances obviously because I'm recording it here, but certainly in a mix, you can't really tell. I mean, they are so close. I mean, Marshall really captured the essence of the JCM 900. I don't even know which 900 they're supposed to be replicating. This is the 50-watt version. There's a 100-watt version of this amp. There's the 900 SLX. So there's a couple different models of the JCM 900, but considering these are pretty close, safe to assume this was the line that they were thinking about when they created this pedal. But of course, in a mix, as we've already shown, the differences are extremely subtle. You've already heard it in solo, but now that you know which is which, let's take a listen again to the pedal and the amp side by side and see if those differences are a little more obvious now that we know which one's which. So it's that kind of playing, big power chords, sort of open without any muting, where they sound really similar. As I noted earlier, when I was muting, I think we can start to hear some differences between the two, but with that kind of playing, they are almost identical. Now, one of the keys to getting the two tones sounding similar was this contour knob. Now, that's a mid-range adjustment, but it's not just a boost or a cut. I think there's a frequency curve shift there as well because it sort of changes the sort of structure of that tone. So that was really key in matching the two together. So let's take a listen now to the melodic parts. Again, we heard a lot of the differences more when there was a bit of chugging involved versus playing more open. Let's take a listen. The differences are really subtle and it just seems to be affected by the way you play. Amps are very reactive, perhaps pedals a little less so, but Marshall really has captured the essence of the JCM 900 sound and really handy pedal if you don't have a JCM 900. It'd be interesting to pair this with different amplifiers and things like that. But on that note, I do want to twist some dials so you can get a sense of what the pedal does. So why don't we put the 900 away for now? I'm going to plug this into the Angle Powerball 2 here, just a completely different amplifier. And I'll just loop a few chords and twist some dials just so you can get a sense of what the pedal's actually doing. As someone that's owned a JCM 900 for like over 20 years or more, dating myself, I've always liked the JCM 900. I find it more versatile than some people claim that it is. It's a really good amplifier. It can give you that big and bold sound. It has a great clean channel, actually. That's not something I was able to demonstrate with this shootout, but in terms of getting the essence of that high gain distortion sound that the 900 puts out, I think they did a great job with this pedal. I think it's great that they've introduced this lineup of pedals. They've got different pedals for different eras or different models in their lineup. But again, as someone who's owned a JCM 900 for a long time, I'm pretty sensitive to the sound of a 900, and I think they did a really, really great job with this pedal. Now, keeping in mind, this is a distortion pedal, so you can use it just like any other distortion pedal on your board. You can put it into the front of the amplifier. You can use it to boost your amplifier, or as I did here, if you've got a send return loop on your amplifier, you can use it to add another channel to your amp. So you've got a completely different amplifier. You can introduce those 900 tones to your setup. So really great job by Marshall. That pedal is a lot of fun, but I would love to hear your thoughts. You know, first of all, do you like a JCM 900? Because I know some of you just don't, but for those of you that do, I would love to know your thoughts. Did this thing 900? Let me know in the comments. But a big, big thank you goes out to Sweetwater for sponsoring this video and for providing this pedal. I really appreciate the support from Sweetwater. I do have links in the description. Those are affiliate links to Sweetwater. If you do choose to buy something, it doesn't cost you anything extra, but it does support the channel and helps me make content just like this, and I appreciate all of the help. Anyways, if you did enjoy this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. And while you're down there, well, we have been talking about the JCM 900, and I've asked the question, why do people hate the JCM 900? Well, I explored that in this video. I'm gonna pop that over here if you wanna check it out. And remember, you don't need a band to rock and roll. I'll catch you in the next one.